Hello class, this video is on the metric system. First, your metric system is what's used in science, the science world, as well as every other country in the world except America. They have a system of prefixes that are related to something called a base unit, and that is how you can determine the size of your measurement. So first, let's talk about some of the base units. One of the base units you're probably familiar with is length. It is measured in meters, which is abbreviated as a lowercase m. There's also mass, which is measured in grams. It's abbreviated as a lowercase g. Volume is measured in liters, which is abbreviated as a capital L. Time is measured in seconds. It's abbreviated as a lowercase s. And then energy has two different units. One unit is in joules, which is abbreviated as a capital J. The other unit is calories, which is abbreviated as a little CAL. Now again, these base units are what all of your measurements are compared to, all of your prefixes are compared to, and it's all of your sizes work for meters as well as for grams. So whichever base unit you're looking at, your prefixes will follow the same rules. So let's talk about the prefixes. And this was one sheet that I passed out in class. Over here on the left side are all of the possible prefixes. Nano. Now again, your nano prefix could refer to nanometers. It could also refer to nanograms or nanoliters. Your base unit is interchangeable with your prefix. Nano has a little n, and 1 nanometer or 1 nano base unit is equal to 10 to the negative 9th meters, or 10 to the negative 9th, whatever your base unit is. There's micro, milli, centi. You're probably more familiar with the milli and the centi than the micro and the nano. All of these four base units are smaller than one base unit. Excuse me, all of these prefixes are smaller than one base unit. And so your base unit would end up about here if you wanted to compare its size to these other units. There's also a prefix called kilo, such as a kilometer or a kilometer or a kilogram, and then mega. Now, kilo is more common, mega is not as common, but you could talk about like a megabyte or a gigabyte. Those are also prefixes. We're just not going to go that in depth. And your kilo and your mega, those are larger than one base unit. Also on this sheet, so we've got the size here. These numbers are referring to one of your prefix is equal to this amount of your base unit. So if I was looking at centi, I could say that 1 centimeter is equal to 10 to the negative 2 meters. And when we have conversions with our metric system, we're going to use these sizes as our factors, or those ratios, those fractions that can compare our two different units. With our centimeters, or our centiliters, or our centigrams, again, that last letter is referring to whatever base unit you have. So in this case, this is referring to the meters base unit, and then we've got our cm, that's saying our centimeters. In our size comparison, so 1 centimeter is equal to 10 to the negative 2 meters. We can write that as a fraction to put the 10 to the negative 2 meters on top, the 1 centimeters on bottom. It would also be an equivalent fraction to put the 1 centimeter on top and the 10 to the negative 2 meters on the bottom. These are your factors. Again, they are equivalent and they are reciprocals of each other. They're flipped of each other. In this one, we've got the 10 to the negative 2 on top. In this one, we've got the 10 to the negative 2 on the bottom. But it's equivalent. They equal the same amount. Now, you're probably more familiar with 1 meter is equal to 100 centimeters. And again, these two are just flipped of each other. We've got the 100 on the bottom here and the 100 on the top here. It all depends on what units we're trying to cancel. So, let's use this in some examples. In my first example, I want to figure out how many centimeters are in 8.94 meters. So I would start out with my fact, which is my 8.94 meters. Now, I don't want to stay in meters anymore. I'm trying to figure out how many centimeters. So I ultimately need to cancel this unit, meters, so that I can change into a different unit, which is what I'm trying to get as centimeters. Well, to cancel my unit, right now it's on the top. To cancel it, I need to put it on the bottom. Then I can look at my factors and be like, okay, do I have a factor that gets me from meters into centimeters directly? So let's see, if I look at my centi, I do have a relationship from my centimeters into my base unit, which is meters, so I have that direct comparison. I can put centimeters right here on top. The reason why I'm asking that question, do I have a factor that gets me from meters to centimeters? I'm asking that question because in some conversions you might need multiple factors in order to get to the correct answer. And we'll see an example like that in a few moments. Now, in this example, I have meters, which is my base unit, on the bottom of my factor. This is my fact. This is my factor. So I need to find a factor that has my base unit of meters on the bottom. So I'm going to come back to the sheet. I'm working in centi, and this one that I was talking about earlier has centimeters on the bottom, but not the base unit on the bottom. I need my base unit, m, on the bottom. So I can't use that factor, but instead I could use this one, where my centimeters is on top and my meters, or my base unit, is on the bottom. Now, 10 to the negative 2, you're probably not as familiar with that notation. It's scientific notation. You'll have to plug it slightly different into your calculator. But we could also use this one over here, where it says 100 centimeters is equal to 1 meter. Again, I want that base unit on the bottom because that's what I need here in order to cancel it. So I'm going to plug that information in. It says, let me try to put these pages next to each other. My 100 centi is on top and my 1 meter on the bottom. So when I plug this into my calculator, I'm simply going to go 8.94 times 100, because those two are on the top, divided by 1 won't change anything, equals, I get 894 centimeters. Well, that's good and all, because this is written in meters, but what if I use a different base unit? So in my next example, how many liters are in 50.5 milliliters? Again, I start out by identifying my fact, and then my factor. My fact is going to be the information that I have in my problem, so 50.5 milliliters. Now I wrote this out, so we're going to have to abbreviate this. My milli is written as a lowercase m, and my liters, which is my base unit for volume, is abbreviated as a capital L. So I'm going to write this as a little m, capital L. That's my abbreviation for milliliters. Now, I don't want to stay in milliliters anymore. It instead wants me to convert into how many liters. So I need to cancel these milliliters. Well, right now, in order to cancel them, I need them in the opposite location. Here they're on the top, so I'm going to end up putting them on the bottom so that they cancel. Again, that weird question. Do I have a factor that gets me from milliliters into the unit I'm trying to find, which is liters? Well, if I look on here, milli is a prefix, liters is my base unit. My factors can convert directly from my prefix into my base unit. Perfect. So I'm going to put my base unit on top because that is what I'm trying to find. Now let's worry, now that I've got my units in the right spot, those two cancel, I'm left with liters, which is what I'm trying to find. Now that my units work out, let's worry about plugging in the numbers. So I need to find a factor that has my milli on the bottom and my base unit on the top. So if I refer back to this, here's my milli. I need my milli on the bottom and my base unit on top. Well, these are all in reference to meters, but again, the rules are the same whether we're looking at meters, liters, grams, calories. All of these factors are going to be the same. You just might have to change this last letter. So, I need milli on the bottom, my base unit on top. I could use this factor, or that puts milli on the top, so I couldn't use that one. This puts milli on the bottom, so I could use that one, and that puts milli on the top, so I couldn't use that one. I could use either of these two in this conversion factor for my problem. Now again, 10 to the negative third might be not as familiar, so I'm going to go ahead and use the 1,000 amount. So that says 1,000 milli is equal to 1 of my base unit. Now, when I plug this into my calculator, I can do 50.5 divided by 1,000 equals 0.0505 liters. Something that I do, my calculator just gave me the decimal point, 0.050, so that would have started there. I would like you to get into the habit of putting a 0 in front of your decimal so that it doesn't get lost with your handwriting. Okay, cool. Let's step it up slightly a bit more. How many mg, which stands for milligrams, are in 6.79 kg, which is kilograms? Okay, so I need to keep in mind my fact and my factor. My fact is the information I'm given, so I'm going to start with my 6.79 kilograms. And I need my units to be ultimately in how many milligrams. So my answer needs to be in milligrams. I'm going to set up my factor. Now I'm in kilograms. I want kilograms to cancel, so I'm going to put it in the opposite location, in this case on the bottom. And I am trying to get to milligrams. So I need to find a factor that gets me directly from kilograms into milligrams. Well, if I look on this page, find my kilo, I can go kilo into my base unit, but I don't have any factor that gets me directly from kilo into milli. So I have to go through my base unit. I have to convert my kilograms into my base unit. And then I have to do another step where I can convert my base unit into the unit I'm trying to find. So my kilograms can go to my base unit. In that case, kilos on the bottom, base unit is on top, so I would be looking at, well, kilos on the top here, so that one won't work for me. I need my kilo on the bottom. I could use that unit factor, I could use that factor, or kilo on the bottom, I could use that factor. Either of those two would work in this situation. So I'm going to use the 1,000. That says 1,000 of my base unit is equal to 1 of my kilo, and in this case, kilogram. Now I'm in my base unit, but I'm not quite to my milligrams. So I have to set up another factor. My kilograms canceled. I need to now cancel my grams out. So currently I'm in grams. I don't want to stay in grams because I want to go to milligrams. So to cancel my grams, I'm going to put it on the bottom. And I'm going to try to find a factor that can get me from grams directly into milligrams. So, well, milli is a prefix. My grams is a base unit. So yeah, I do have a factor that can go from my grams base unit into my milligrams. So I'm going to put my milligrams on top because that's what I'm trying to find, and I have a factor that can get me from this unit into this unit. That would cancel my grams, and then my milligrams would be left over. Now that my units work, let's plug in the numbers. So I need to find that factor that has the milli on the top and my base unit on the bottom. So come to milli, I need my milli on the top, so I could use, I'm going to use a different color, I could use this one, because that puts milli on top, or I could use this one, because that puts milli on top. Again, I'll use the 1,000 because we're more familiar with the 1,000 than the 10 to the negative third. So that has 1,000 milligrams is equal to 1 gram. Just to double check, I started with my kilograms, I canceled my kilograms, I converted it into grams, I canceled my grams. The unit that's left is milligrams. Double check that my larger unit, kilo, is 1 kilogram to 1,000 grams. And then milli is smaller than my gram, my base unit, so there should be 1,000 milligrams in 1 gram. So I've double checked that I've got my numbers in all the right spot. Now let's worry about the calculator. So 6.79 times 1,000. I could divide by 1, but that's going to get me the same thing. And then times 1,000 again. Again, I could divide by 1, but it's not going to change my answer. Equals. I have 679,000 milligrams. Well, that's kind of a really big number. So let's go ahead and convert that into scientific notation. In scientific notation, I need my coefficient, this important number part, to be between 1 and 10. So I'm going to put my 6 and then my decimal, and then add my other important digits. I don't have to worry about the zeros because those are just placeholders. Now, my decimal is at the end of my number. I need to count the times or how many times I'm moving my decimal to get it after my 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times in order to get my decimal from the end of my number to the 6th, after the 6th location. So times 10 to the 6th. Just to double check, this was a really big number, so my exponent, or my power here, should be a positive value. So I'm going to put my unit. Hope that was helpful with converting to the metric system. Please let me know if you have questions or confusions. Have a great day!